Have you ever wanted to demystify color grading and achieve a comprehensive look? Well, then this video is for you. In the end, you will know about the different aspects of color grading and how to nail them every single time. First things first, why even care about the individual aspects of color grading? Well, think of color grading as a cake. Even though it can look and taste awesome at the first glance, one moldy fruit can ruin it. In this video, I will focus on these 5 aspects. But first, back to a cake analogy. What do you do before baking? Well, you make sure that all your ingredients are good to use. But when it comes to color grading, we don't have individual ingredients we mix together. Or do we? The technique I'm about to show you is all about removing distractions. So when going back to our overview, we could add another column and ask, what is their respective distraction? We are starting with the white balance. How do we achieve a correct white balance? We look for a region that should be white, take our draw mask and isolate it, because the distraction is the footage that contains all the other information that clutters our vector scope. We can easily adjust our white balance once all of this is gone. Moving on and getting a little more sophisticated with exposure and contrast. Have a look at these 3 squares. Which one is the brightest and which one is the darkest? Of course, we could use our waveforms and check their brightness. However, it becomes cluttered when working with an actual piece of footage. So what can we do to make luminance the only thing we care about when adjusting exposure and contrast? Simply, we desaturate our footage. One important note from here on forward is that your checking instances should always be the last thing you have in your timeline. That means either at the bottom of the inspector or within the uppermost adjustment layer of your timeline. Now we can adjust exposure and contrast precisely without being distracted by colors that make areas appear brighter or darker than they actually are. Okay, it's time to deal with colors. In the first instance, we only want to focus on the hues. So what do we do to focus on the hues? Simply, we boost the saturation, so we can adjust them without bothering doing anything else. In this example, I just want to do some minor color shift. Secondly, we will adjust the luminance of our colors. Dealing with luminance, does that ring a bell? Right, we desaturate our footage once more. If you're dealing with 8-bit footage, you can leave this step out, or you should be extremely gentle. I'm also working with 8-bit footage, so I will make only minor adjustments. I will try to increase the contrast between myself in the foreground and the wall behind me. And I think that's about it. Now we want to deal with saturation. So what is the distraction we need to remove? Well, the answer to this question is rather complex. Various aspects contribute to our perception of saturation. However, saturation is usually one of the last things I take care of. So if I don't have a particular look in mind, I can use saturation to draw your eyes to something I want to emphasize without your brain even analyzing the scene. That means my distraction in this case when dealing with saturation is structure. For example, if I wanted to sell you the freshness of these tomatoes, I would blur my image and boost the saturation of the greens until they are very present despite the blur. Or have a look at this beautiful shot of some grass. If I want to make these yellow flowers really pop, I will add some blur and then individually adjust the saturation of yellow and green. If I disable the blur, have a look at the before and after, how these flowers stick out. Last but not least, I have already done half of the work for you. This is the Check Layer plugin, where you can do everything we just explored neatly in one place. You can download it for free on my website. The link is in the video description. And if you want to improve your color grading even further, you should watch this video next.